It's the finale.
It is the finale of season 2.
It's the finale, people. It's here.
Crazy. Are you guys sad? We're sad.
I'm quite sad. I'm quite sad that the season's over.
Yeah.
I've had so much fun this season.
I know, it's been a really good one this season. I think I've thoroughly enjoyed it.
I feel like every episode has a special place in my heart.
Yeah, I think so.
And I love each episode.
Mm-hmm. I love them all individually. That's bullshit. Pick a favourite. No.
What was your favourite episode of season 2?
Oh, it's a tough one because there's been so many good ones. I think possibly Greyfriars Kirkyard, or episode 1, because we got to go there and do the thing. That was pretty special. That was really cool.
Well, before we talk, we should probably introduce the podcast before we talk about this.
I mean,
this is still intro.
That's probably a good shout, eh? This is the Generally Spooky podcast.
In case you didn't know.
In case you didn't know.
And this is the season 2 finale, which is why we're quite pumped.
So we are amped, we're here,
which is why we are jumping the gun.
I'm Kieran.
I'm Eilidh.
And we're your lovely hosts to bring you through these spooky Scottish history stories.
Lovely is definitely in air quotes.
Lovely. Maybe we should be ghoulish.
Ghoulish.
The ghoulish hosts.
But then I want to say ghoulish ghosts.
Ghoulish hosts. It does sound wrong, doesn't it?
But ghoulish ghosts sounds better.
It does. So what's your favourite episode of the season?
I don't know. Like I said, I have so many that I really love. Greyfriars Kirkyard was really special. For the same reason that you said it's special, because we got to go. That was completely different and something we had never done before. And I loved it. It was so good. The City of the Dead tours were so good to us. Unbelievably good to us. And, Jamie, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
We appreciate it immensely, and it's going to stay with us for a long time.
Yeah. An episode well worth listening to if you haven't already.
I would say so. It's a very interesting place with a very bloody history. And we went on a ghost tour for the first time.
Yeah, that was pretty fun.
As hosts of a spooky podcast, that's pretty major.
It's quite an important milestone, isn't it?
But I don't know. I feel like I have different favourites for different reasons. Because I love that episode because we got to go. I am so immensely proud of the Mary Queen of Scots episode.
Oh, yeah.
But that's more of a personal thing because I know how much work I put into that. That was a milestone for me personally.
Yeah, you got that done.
That was intense.
I really enjoyed the Scale House and Skara Brae episode.
That was fun. I feel like that was ghosty and it was fun.
Yeah. It was just a really enjoyable episode. Well, I think my favourite bit is I keep forgetting if it's House of Dun or the Lord of Killing Castle, but whoever it was that had the funeral where the ship captain saw the devil ride in his flaming chariot.
That's Culzean Castle.
Is that I keep mixing those up. Yeah, that's pretty spectacular, just as an image.
Sir Archibald the Wicked.
Yes.
Of Culzean Castle.
Yeah, who got cursed.
That is a good story.
Yeah. That's possibly my highlight bit. But there's so many lords, I keep muddling up who's Lord of where.
Tell me about it. Do you know how hard that is to keep track of? Week on week?
Yeah.
As I just keep adding to the number of lords that I know. It's only going to get worse this episode too. Oh, no. Let me tell you. Do you know how difficult that is?
Oh, lordy.
Yeah, I have lots of favourites.
Well, I was about to just keep going. Because I really enjoyed the App and Murder episode. That was our first, whodunit. But then I'm just going to individually list all the episodes. I'm the Boleskine House episode was also really good.
It's tricky.
Yeah, so, but this one. But this one. Oh, this one, though. And then...
Because further to that, I also really loved talking about Glencoe with you last week.
That was also phenomenal. Phenomenal.
I feel like that episode is a favourite for me because there was an emotion to it that we hadn't really had before. Or I hadn't really felt to that degree before.
Yes, I'd agree with that.
So it's a favourite for a different reason. We need an awards ceremony where you can have different categories. So it can be the best in this and the best in that. You know?
Our best whodunit episode.
Because in my opinion, our best ghost story episode was from last season, was the Black Lady of Lark Hall.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
I think that's our best ghost story.
Mm-hmm. I'd agree with that. Because that was entirely around the ghost.
Yeah.
Trixie.
I mean, if you want to weigh in on this conversation, let us know what wins your Generally Spooky award.
Yep. Hit us up on Instagram at Generally Spooky. Or you could let us know while you donate to us to support the Generally Spooky podcast.
That has been one of the most amazing things about this season.
Yes.
The people who have donated to us, you honestly don't know how excited we get when we get the notification in and how stunned we are.
Yeah.
Every single time. There aren't words.
No, it's
really.
truly phenomenal.
See, there aren't words.
There aren't. Well, I can't say that, at least.
Yeah, that's been quite incredible. Still can't believe it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just in awe. So if you'd like to join the ranks of those wonderful people, you can donate at generallyspooky.com/donate.
Yep.
Or if you just go to the website, there's a big button.
It's just a little button that says donate on it. Yeah. It's pretty easy to find.
And it's via PayPal.
So it's all safe.
It's all good.
But yeah, we have plans for what you guys have donated to us so far. It's really exciting.
Yes.
So thank you.
Very exciting. And we're already excited for season 3.
I know, we have so many plans.
Yep.
I have so many stories in my collection already. I can't wait to get to.
I can't remember if we decided a date or a month for season 3.
We kind of talked just about early next year.
Yeah.
We don't have a date locked in yet, but when we do, I will probably announce it on Instagram first. Yes. That's where I am most active.
Mm-hmm. Be like February, March time, I think.
I honestly can't remember. Early next year,
yeah,
we'll be back with season 3. So we are coming back.
We are coming back for a 3rd season, back by popular demand.
And just because we want to.
Yeah, because we like it. And no one can stop us.
I know, isn't that the beauty of this? That you can just do it?
We can't be cancelled.
No.
We can't be pulled by the network.
No. No network heads in charge. In charge.
It just us.
Well, would you care to bring season 2 to a close with me?
Before we do, I want to give a little shout out to Batch Coffee.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Who have sent us some delicious coffee that we're drinking. And it's a really good time. That's a UK-based coffee subscription. Batch, B-A-T-C-H. They send out coffee, I think it's every 2 weeks or every month. And they work with independent roasters in the UK to find great coffee. And then they send it to you in recyclable packaging. And it's really tasty and well worth it.
I should say that they haven't sponsored the podcast.
No, it's not a sponsor. It's someone I met through the coffee site I run, Above Average Coffee.
Yeah. So this isn't a podcast sponsor, although we are open to that.
Yeah.
They have not sponsored the podcast.
No, but I just wanted to give them a wee shout out because I'm drinking the coffee just now and it's real good. And with that said, I would love to finish season 2 with you.
Okay. Well, I picked a really great episode for a season finale, I think.
Good.
Because we talked about it and we wanted to end on a high.
Yeah.
Which was why the Glencoe Massacre was last week's episode.
Because I asked if we're going to have a Christmas special to finish with. If it'll technically be a Christmas special for our last episode. And you're like, well, it's going to be the Glencoe Massacre, so absolutely not.
Like, yeah, that is the opposite of a Christmas special, if ever there was one. Then I got us thinking that it might not be nice to end the season on that note.
It's a very brutal note to end the season on.
So we decided that we would end on a high, like I said. Mm-hmm. So today, we're talking about the Stone of Destiny.
Such a good name.
Isn't it? How cool does that sound?
I remember learning there was a Stone of Destiny and just being like, really?
It's
That's
not even
amazing.
I didn't just make this up either. It's not a nickname I've just given the episode. This is a real thing.
Yep.
The Stone of Destiny.
And I knew this is what the episode was about, but that's all I know.
So you don't know anything about it?
Not really, no. I think it was where the Scottish kings were crowned. But that's it.
Well, that's good, because I get to tell you. This is a story that fascinated me since I was really wee. I had a History of Scotland book, which is currently sitting on my desk. And in that book, they talk about the stone with lots of pictures. And it completely stuck in my head. And I used to read it over and over again, because I just thought it was really cool.
What's the Stone of Destiny?
Right?
But it's real.
The fact that it's a real thing, and that's its name, just incredible. So, the stone has a few different names. It's been called the Stone of Scone, the Coronation Stone, Jacob's Pillow or the Stone of Jacob, and the Tanis Stone. But for the sake of keeping things simple, I'm just going to call it the Stone of Destiny or the Stone for the episode, instead of jumping between.
Yeah, if you say the stone, I won't just assume you're talking about a different stone.
Yeah. And basically, the Stone of Destiny is an ancient relic. It's a stone. It's not a metaphor for anything. It is a literal stone. It's a massive block of sandstone. And I have the dimensions, if that will help you picture it. It doesn't help me picture it because I can't, my brain doesn't work that way. But I will read them to you because you're quite good with numbers.
Yeah, my brain works this way.
So it is 26 inches or 66 centimetres by 16.7 inches, 42 centimetres, by 10 inches, 10.5 inches, I beg your pardon, or 26.7 centimetres.
It's not very big.
I mean, it's fairly big. It's a solid stone.
Well, yeah, if you were trying to pick it up, it'd be quite big, wouldn't it? But I imagine it to be like desk size, you know?
No, it's not that big.
Yeah.
I can't really think of a good comparison.
It's much closer to like two shoeboxes beside each other.
Yeah, it's not like a standing stone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's a smaller stone. But it's pretty big, and it's also quite heavy. It is over 150 kilograms.
Whoa.
152, to be exact.
Exact. That's plenty big enough, isn't it?
Or 335 pounds. I don't weigh things in pounds.
I don't know what pounds are.
Unless I'm baking.
Well, it's weird, unless you're like weighing yourself. Because then you do stone and pounds.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But yeah, it's pretty heavy. The stone has 2 iron rings at either end, which are there to help move it. But, you know, it's going to be pretty tricky to tote that around.
Yeah.
You know, like a suitcase or something, because it is very heavy. And it has lots of carvings on the outside of it. I think on one side there's like a vague cross that's been carved into it, but some of the carvings that are in the stone we still don't understand the meaning of. A lot like some of the picture stones that are out there.
Oh, very cool.
We're not too sure what they mean. Obviously, it's been pretty weathered and things. It's not, the carvings aren't clear. Looking at it, it just kind of looks like a big block of stone.
Must be really old.
It is, and we're going to get into that right now.
It's like I know to like lead you on in this way.
I know, maybe you're getting more practiced at the kind of comments and questions to make.
Yeah.
Also, I apologise if I sound strange. I cannot clear my throat. It's not happening. You're just going to have to deal with me croaking.
I apologise if I sound strange, but it's just my voice.
It's just my face, sir. The origins of the stone are kind of debated. No one is 100% sure where it comes from or when it comes from, really. But it's very, very old. The stories go back a long time. A debunked story claimed that the stone came from Israel and was slept on by Jacob, who's, I don't want to say a character from the Bible because I feel that's disrespectful, but he's talked about in the Bible in the book of Genesis. Now, from what I remember, Jacob was the father of Joseph, who had the Technicolor Dreamcoat.
Oh.
That's where he's placed.
That's him notched in there.
Yes, I don't mean any disrespect. I'm just not fully versed in
the Bible.
In the Bible. I could be wrong. But this story of the stone comes from a larger theory that suggests that all people from the UK are descended from the 10 lost tribes of ancient Israel. But there is lots of evidence against this. So this is not a proper theory, it has been proven to be wrong.
Yes, and this would be the case if it wasn't unequivocally wrong.
Yes. Basically every type of research you can do has proven that this isn't true. From what I could see. Like genetic research, everything. But, that's one of the stories that goes around about it. So I felt I should mention it.
That makes sense why it's Jacob's stone.
Yes, yeah. A more reliable story of the stone's origins says that it actually came from Ireland. And the story is that the great Fergus, son of Erc, he was the king of Dalriata, which is the old name for the land that is now Scotland.
Oh, okay.
To understand it, you kind of need to know a bit about how Scotland came to be, which I'm hoping to do an episode on at some point, but for a long time Scotland wasn't a united country. It was different territories that different groups of people owned. So you had the Picts and the Gaels, and it varied. So Dalriata kind of fits into that story. Fergus was the king, and he took the stone over from Ireland, and he landed, because he sailed, around Argyll, so in the southwest. And he was crowned on the stone and became the king of Dalriata. Now, a kind of offshoot of that story is that this stone is the same stone that the ancient kings of Ireland were crowned upon. That Fergus kind of stole it. It was taken over here.
Interesting.
But there are other theories that are adamant that that stone never left Ireland.
Oh.
So you can make of that what you will. Both have been suggested. And I couldn't find any way to prove it either way.
I suppose if it's just sandstone as well, because I was thinking that they could check what the stone is made of to then, match it. But if it's sandstone, that's somewhat abundant.
Well, we're actually going to talk about that later.
Oh, okay.
That is a point that comes up. The stone as we know it, so we're talking about the stone that exists now in Scotland. It was entrusted to the monks of Iona, which is a famous island off the west coast of Scotland, really close to Mull. I'd imagine you've probably heard of Iona and the abbey there.
I have. Only fairly recently, but I have.
Okay, well, you've heard of it. Iona is famous because St. Columba had the abbey built on the island.
We did that in an episode, that's why I've heard of it.
Yes, yeah. And it's seen as the birthplace of Christianity in Scotland.
Yes.
Basically. From what I understand, it was Columba and his followers that converted the Picts to Christianity. And we talked about it a bit in our Uckert Castle episode and our Loch Ness Monster episode last season. The monks on Iona were given the Stone of Destiny, which was now an important relic even back then. This is between 400 and 800 AD.
Yeah.
A long time ago. But it was important even then because it had been used to crown kings. So it needed to be protected. But the monks didn't have it for very long. Have you ever heard of the Vikings?
The Vikings. I think I've heard of the Vikings. Some sort of sports team in America, right?
No. The Norse Raiders. The Vikings are a huge part of Scotland's history because, they settled here, they raided here, and monasteries were particularly vulnerable from attack by Viking raids because they couldn't really defend themselves.
Yeah.
And they had a lot of valuables. So...
And they're often on little islands away from the mainland.
Exactly. They were pretty vulnerable.
Ripe for the picking.
Yes. The Vikings actually attacked Iona several times over several years. They kept coming back. In one of the attacks, 68 monks were killed.
Ooh, that's a shame.
68.
Do you think they were there going no, it couldn't happen twice. There's no way they could possibly come and attack us again. Oh no, a third time. No chance. We've got nothing left.
They're talking 4 or 5 times, from what I remember. Not good.
Not good.
So because of this, because of the danger that the Vikings were posing to the monks on Iona, the stone was moved to stop it being stolen by the Vikings.
That makes sense.
It's smart. Now, this is only a little bit related, but I read recently, the past few weeks, that the term Vikings shouldn't apply to that whole society of people. That the word Viking really is a job description.
Oh.
So it was a role, it was an occupation rather than the whole society.
Interesting.
Isn't it? I never knew that.
I didn't know that either. So the Vikings did invade, but they didn't go back to live amongst the Vikings?
No. From what I read, anyway. I'm quite happy to be wrong if I've misunderstood that.
That's cool.
I read that recently and I was like, huh.
That's really interesting.
There you go. So the stone was back on the mainland and it was taken to Dunkeld, which we visited. It's a beautiful part of the country.
Yep.
And then it was taken to Athol, which is a little bit further north. But finally, the stone came to a stop at a place called Scone.
Not Scone.
No. Scone is spelt Scone. Like the baked good, but it's not pronounced that way. It's pronounced Scone. And over the years, the spelling of it has changed dramatically. Looking back through historical documents, Scone has been spelt in every way you can imagine. Really? Yeah. So it gets confusing, but Scone.
Scone.
And that's why one of the names for the stone is the Stone of Scone.
That does make sense.
Because it was there for a very long time.
That name I'd heard of, but I'd not heard of the Stone of Jacob.
Yeah, I wasn't really familiar with that either.
No. Or the last one you said, the began with an A.
The Tanist Stone.
That didn't begin with an A, but yes, the Tanist Stone.
Well, that relates to what we were talking about last week with the clan system.
Okay.
Because you had a Tanist within the clan who was second in command.
Oh, yeah.
That's why one of the names is the Tanist Stone. Because it crowned kings.
Interesting. Not just because the stone was second in command.
No.
So I will refer you to my second in command for this complaint.
This is the complaints department. According to legend, it was a man called Kenneth MacAlpin that brought the stone to Scone. And he was one of the early kings of Scotland. We may have an episode about him.
Is this Scotland the whole?
Yes. Yes, I think. Well, yes and no. Because he was born on Iona in 810 AD. And during his rule, one of the things that he really wanted to do was bring all of the kingdoms that made up Scotland together. So he had an idea for a united country. I can't remember if he actually managed it.
Oh, okay.
Whether he was king of everyone.
So he probably thought himself the king of everyone.
Yes.
But whether he was acknowledged and respected as such is probably debatable.
Yes. I haven't really looked into him too much.
Do you think because he was born on Iona, he thought it was his destiny?
No. But, you know, he had some kind of an idea of being king of this entire country.
Yep.
But it didn't exist in the way that we know it.
Yes.
It's difficult when you're looking that far back in Scotland's history. You kind of have to put aside how you understand the country to be. I know that it wasn't run that way back then. But he was the one who brought the stone from Iona to Scone. And the stone was placed in Scone Abbey, which makes sense. It's an important relic into the church to keep it safe.
Yep.
But there's a pretty cool reason and history as to why Scone was chosen as the spot for the stone.
I have often wondered. This
place was supposedly at the centre of the kingdom of the Picts.
Oh.
It was historically important even back then. Lots of legends and folklore exists that include Scone. And it was really interesting to read about. One of the stories talks about a ceremony that used to take place in Scone, where important figures from all across Scotland would come to Scone, and this is where they would negotiate and try to maintain peace and figure out how to live alongside each other. And when they entered the great hall that used to be there, they would hang their shields up on the wall, which would have their coats of arms on them.
Very cool.
And when they were in there, when everyone had arrived, they would beat on their shields as if they were drums. And this gave Scone the nickname in lots of legends and folklore as Scone of Noisy Shields, or Scone of High Shields. They talk about that in a lot of poems about the place.
Wow.
It sounds like a different world.
Yeah, that's like, unreal.
It could come from a book.
Yeah. It reminds me of when we were in Iceland doing the Golden Circle tour, Golden Triangle tour, whatever it was. And you go to the place where the first parliament was.
Yeah,
it's just
yeah.
The big field, basically. There was nothing there. That's just where they all convened for the first time. Reminds me of that.
It's very cool. Very, very cool. And there's definitely a similar vibe to that, I feel. There's another story that I really loved about Scone, and it was a tradition that used to take place on Moot Hill, which is in Scone. And Moot Hill is where councils would happen. So kind of like what you're talking about, out in the open. And moot basically just means like a council, a meeting, kind of like an ent moot.
Oh yeah, not a moot point.
No, which is confusing because you have a council coming together at Moot Hill to try and sort things out. That's a joke waiting to happen.
I thought that's what I was trying to formulate in my head. I'm like, oh, there's a joke there. There's a joke there. I can't.
Well, no, a moot, it basically just means a council, a gathering. So whenever a noble or a leader had to pledge loyalty to the king, it would happen on this hill. So this is a bit later than when we were talking about where Scotland exists as a country. And part of the ceremony involved these leaders who were coming to pledge loyalty bringing soil from where they lived in their boots to the ceremony.
Oh, in their boots.
Yeah, or like in the bindings of their shoes and things like that. So they would be standing on their own land while they took this pledge.
Oh.
They'd be bringing a part of home with them while they made this decision to look after their people.
Very nice. I got a jar of dirt. I got a jar of dirt.
So eventually, when kings were crowned, they were crowned on this hill too. This hill would be covered in soil from all over Scotland.
That's really cool.
So it's all very symbolic. They have all this earth from all over the country, which meant that the new king would be promising to lead all his people, protect all his people, while standing on soil from all over the land he was about to rule.
Very nice. I like that.
Isn't it? It's such a lovely image. Like taking a bit of the earth.
Yeah, a bit of your homeland with you.
And then you leave it there and the king is standing on all of Scotland.
Yeah, standing on it all equally.
Yeah.
I love that.
It's very cool.
That's awesome.
So Scone had this reputation as a place of kings and kingship. And that seems to be the reason that Kenneth MacAlpin took it there. There's a saying that goes, "As the bell of Scone rang, so mote it be," which basically means that if... I'm trying to think of a way to put it. If laws are made in Scone or commands are handed down from Scone, you have to follow it. Like, it is wise, it is the law.
That makes sense. It's the top.
Yeah, I'm finding it hard to explain now, even though it made complete sense when I wrote it down.
Well, that makes sense.
It was very important. The place was a big deal, it was very significant. And so was the stone, which is why it was brought there. The Stone of Destiny became part of being a king in Scotland. You didn't have the right to rule if you weren't crowned on the Stone of Destiny. And from what I understand, they sat on the stone and were crowned.
I mean, that makes sense.
I imagine that being such a nice ceremony, like out under an open sky on top of this hill.
This hill where the land of all the country has
Comes
been
together.
brought and put down. And I mean, the Stone of Destiny.
Yeah. That's crowned like ancient kings before you.
Yeah. There's something very romantic in that, isn't there?
Right? There really is. I feel like it almost epitomises what you imagine like a Scottish king to be. But naturally, as with all things we talk about, the good thing couldn't last.
Naturally.
Change was coming, unfortunately. Now we're in 1286 in Scotland. So about 500 years after the birth of Kenneth MacAlpin. King Alexander III is on the throne in Scotland. Now at this time, also important to remember, we've talked about it before, but Scotland had a monarchy that was independent of England.
Yes.
They weren't the same thing. You had a King of Scotland and a King of England. They were different. We have talked about that before, but it's important to know for this story.
Yep.
King Alexander III is on the throne. Or at least he was. He's just died.
Oh.
Which is always a nervous time throughout history.
Yep.
The transfer of power is rarely clean.
No.
Because there's an awful lot at stake. But luckily, Alexander had an heir. His daughter, Margaret.
Excellent.
Who is 7.
Still excellent.
That was fairly common.
Yep.
You had children becoming kings and queens when they were infants.
Mm-hmm.
So she was staying on Orkney, and she had to voyage back to the mainland to become Queen of Scotland. But she became ill on the voyage, and she died.
Oh.
I can't remember if she died before she made it to Scone or wherever, but she died before she could become queen.
Oh no.
This is a big problem, because now the Scottish throne is without an heir. There's nobody after her to become king or queen. No one's steering the ship, but there's no shortage of people who would really like to.
Naturally.
At this point, Scotland is basically on the verge of civil war. So Alexander died in 1286. There's about 10 years of unrest.
Before another king comes?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a long time.
Lots of important families are fighting over who should have the throne, who has the most valid claim, who's best suited for the job. A man called Robert Bruce was one of these contenders.
Oh, we have heard of him.
That's all I'm going to say on that for now. But they can't come to a decision. They can't agree. There's lots of fighting. It's causing real problems. So what do you think makes the most sense in this situation?
Ooh. Do I like...
Well, you have lots of families. There's contenders who have the strongest claim by blood. Mm-hmm. You have people who have effectively been the Tanist to the king, who've been second in command and know the job really well.
Yep.
You have contenders that just have really strong families behind them, so would have a lot of influence, but they can't agree. So what do you do? How do you solve this problem? You
bring all the contenders together and have a series of Herculean-esque tasks for them to complete.
Oh, okay.
You know, they have to earn it. That's what I'm going for. Pretty sure that's not what they did.
Kind of like the Ultimate Beastmaster.
Exactly like the Ultimate Beastmaster. You know, there's the obstacle course. They all have to get it. There's
the big wall.
Yeah, they have to get up the big climbing wall. They have to fill in some official legislation. They have to prove they can read and write. You know, that's important.
Well, that's not what they did.
What?
What they decided they would do was to get a mediator. Someone who could come in, who was objective, who could help them organise this and decide who would be best for the role.
I mean, in theory, excellent idea.
Right, it seems logical. Someone who can mediate and try and stop the fighting between them long enough that they can actually come to an agreement.
But who could possibly do that objectively?
Well, they found someone who they wanted to do it. The Scottish nobles came together and they decided that they were going to ask King Edward I of England to mediate in this dispute.
The first mistake.
Yeah, if you've listened to this podcast long enough, you know where this is going. You know. But please let me tell you anyway, because it's fun. King Edward I graciously accepted the request of the Scottish nobles to come and sort out their little succession issue. Now, I feel like we've talked about this in another episode.
I was thinking that.
I think we have. I think we may have spoken about it either in a witchcraft episode or the Mary Queen of Scots episode.
Yeah.
But I'll explain it again, because it's really important to this story.
Yeah.
The first warning sign came shortly after King Edward I accepted to be the mediator. Before he would make any kind of decision about who would be King of Scotland, and there was only going to be a king. There was no suggestion of a queen.
Naturally.
So I'm not being ignorant here. It was only going to be a king.
Yeah.
Edward demanded that all of those who were in the running for the throne had to recognise him as their overlord.
Well, sure, I'll mediate you, as long as I get absolute power above you. We've got ourselves a deal.
Yes, I feel like we have talked. I think it was in the witchcraft episode. Edward gave himself a title, and you know what they say about people who give themselves a nickname. He demanded that all of those who were after the throne had to recognise him as Lord Paramount of Scotland. It's just madness.
Yeah.
Basically. He's trying to have it recognised that Scotland is basically owned and also below England.
Yeah.
It's like a territory that he owns. And the way that he brought this claim forward was he went to the nobles and he basically said, you have to recognise me as Lord Paramount, or you have to produce some evidence that I'm not.
Oh. I mean...
Yeah.
But,
if you can't produce evidence that I am not the Overlord of Scotland, you have to recognise me as Lord Paramount of Scotland.
I mean, it's a fiendish trick, but...
Isn't that insane?
That is insane, because...
So, yet most of the contenders, they caved to his demands because they could not produce any evidence that he was not the Overlord of Scotland.
But they didn't have any evidence that he was Overlord of Scotland. Other than him saying he is. Like, well, I say you're not. Oh, God.
So this meant a lot of things. That he wanted this title, this nickname that he'd given himself. He wanted the recognition from them that he was their superior and they would have to answer to him. He also demanded ownership of the important castles across Scotland. He demanded that ownership be transferred to him. But, he said he'd give it back in 2 months after a king had been chosen. Because that's totally chill.
Well, why would you not believe him? I suppose... I'm thinking everyone was a fool to ask him and about his demands and everything. But if there had been 10 years of civil war, effectively, and just no leadership...
I can't remember if it was that long. It was about that long. It was 8 or 9 years.
That's a long time to be in that, limbo and just... Yeah, you wouldn't have your best thinking cap on.
You're very vulnerable as a country too, if you don't have a leader.
Yeah, to make the big decisions and to mediate the country.
Yeah. At the end of it all, a man called John Balliol was made King of Scotland. He was deemed to have the strongest claim genetically, by blood.
Yep.
He had the lineage that kind of went back further than King Alexander. I think it was to his sister that he was related, something like that. He had the strongest claim by blood, so he was made king by King Edward I. And he had the strongest claim, but he was not a strong king. He wasn't the strength that Scotland needed against someone like King Edward I. King Edward I was given the nickname the Hammer of the Scots.
Nice one.
Yeah, Scotland needed someone who could stand up to someone like that, and Balliol wasn't it. Edward saw Scotland as being owned by him, and because Balliol didn't really put up a lot of resistance, Edward interfered at every turn when it came to anything Balliol tried to do in Scotland. He forced Balliol to pay for things like the English army.
I mean, that sounds quite familiar to current things, doesn't it? I know.
There's a lot to be said there.
There's a lot of parallels between that and current politics.
But yeah, Balliol was forced to pay Edward for things like the upkeep of the English army. He expected Balliol to send Scottish soldiers south because Edward was at war with France.
Naturally, they always were.
He treated Balliol like dirt. He didn't treat him like a king on equal terms with himself. He was his staff, who he could control, and he was treating Scotland just as an extension of England. Now, you're hearing all of this, and your attitude has come across quite strongly. And I find this funny because the people of Scotland at that time weren't taking this either.
Yeah.
They could see how Balliol was failing them, and Scotland's independence was very rapidly fading away because they weren't in control anymore. What use was a king that didn't fight for his country?
Yeah.
So he ended up being replaced.
Good.
By something called the Council of 12.
Oh.
They basically relieved Balliol of his power. And some of these men were the people who had been in contention for the throne. They wanted to take a stand against Edward, which Balliol hadn't been doing. And they decided to do this in the way that would benefit them, but would also piss off Edward the most.
Yep.
by forming an alliance with France.
Ooh, there it is.
Well, this is an alliance we've talked about before.
Yeah.
This was the Old Alliance.
I was about to say this is the Old Alliance.
Yes, this was when it was signed. They basically agreed that they were going to have each other's back, that if England invaded Scotland or France, the other would invade.
Nice. They just sort of agreed, fuck this guy, right?
Yeah, kind of. They had had enough. And, of course, Edward took this as an attack, the actions of the council, so he invaded Scotland to squash this rebellion against him.
It is an attack, and it is a rebellion, so...
It is, that's what it was, and they knew that. Mm-hmm. And this is what started the Wars of Independence in Scotland, which went on for about 30 years. Like a long time. I'm not going to get too into it because I wouldn't mind having whole episodes on this time in Scottish history. But I want to give you enough to understand what would happen later. So ultimately, Edward defeated the Scots in 1296, the year after the Old Alliance was made. I'm trying to remember when John Balliol was made king. Hang on, I think it was only a year.
Sounds like quite a wet blanket.
He was made king in 1292. So
okay.
It was from 86 to 92 that they didn't have a king.
86.
6 years.
6 years.
So I had that wrong. 6 years. But
still a long time.
Yeah. Edward defeated the Scots in 1296. John Balliol was taken prisoner, I think, with his son, and taken to the Tower of London. And he was forced to abdicate the Scottish throne. It all sounded pretty humiliating. He had to abdicate before he was taken to the Tower of London. And basically they had a big ceremony in Montrose where one of the bishops from England physically, literally tore off his coats of arms.
Oof.
And the signs that he was king. Like, he had this coat that had all of this insignia and things all over on it, and everything was torn off. And he was left with the nickname Tomb Tabard for the rest of his days, which basically means empty coat.
Oofed.
Because he failed as a king, and then he was defeated, and he had this humiliating ceremony where kingship was literally torn off his back, and then he was taken to the Tower of London.
Jeez, oh.
I know your reputation shouldn't be everything, but that's pretty bad.
Well, I wonder how he felt, because he had this strong claim to the throne as the closest blood relative, or whatever it was. He's like, yes, I have the strongest one. Here we go, it's me. It should always be me. Then getting crowned, and then just suddenly being shat on, and then all the people hating you. I wonder what his crossover point up was, where he's like, oh, I've made a mistake. I should have let someone else be king.
I think it's when he conceded to the council.
Oh, yeah.
Because he very much had a backseat there. They took control. They had authority. I feel like that may have been the point.
At the point I'm like, oh shit, what have I done?
Yeah.
Yes, I wanted the power and the glory, but this is not the job for me.
Yeah.
Ooh. That's rough.
Yeah. Back to what the episode is actually about, though. I said that Edward defeated the Scots in 1296.
Yes.
One of the battles during 1296 that kind of cemented the Scots' defeat was the Battle of Dunbar.
Okay.
It was after this battle that King Edward I of England stole the Stone of Destiny. How dare you?
Dude.
The Stone of Kings, with its almost mystical reputation, had been stolen by the English king. The relic that crowned the kings of Scotland had been taken to England. He stole it. The audacity of this man.
Bastard. I thought it was a lot later that it got stolen. I knew it got stolen.
It makes you want to paint your face and scream freedom, doesn't it?
It does. It does. What a bastard. That's not yours, sir.
So with the stone gone and the Scots defeated in battle, although the Wars of Independence would follow, they went on until 1328.
That's a long time.
This wasn't the end, but for now the Scots had been defeated. They now weren't able to crown themselves a king. Scotland was without a monarch.
That's not good.
They had the stone, and Balliol had to abdicate.
So nice one. So they're back to where they started, except they've been utterly shat on.
Yeah, pretty much.
So they gave up all of their power and freedom and ended up exactly where they were.
Yep.
That's fucked up.
Edward took the stone back down to London with him, and apparently there was a big procession celebrating his victory. Everybody saw that he was taking the stone back.
Yep.
He had a special chair made for himself that he wanted the Stone of Destiny to be built into. You know, a sweet little chair for little Edward. And he had it placed in Westminster Abbey. And the chair's still there.
With the stone still in it?
Yes. It has a really high back, and it's made of wood. It's kind of pointy. You'll have seen it without realising what it is. It's in the King's Speech. You know, where Geoffrey Rush sits on the wooden chair.
Oh, yeah, and he's all like, don't sit there.
Yeah, that's this chair.
Fuck.
I mean, probably not in the movie, but
you know,
that's what they're referencing. It's King Edward's chair. It's been ruined a fair bit over the years.
I mean, an 800-year-old chair will be a a bit worse for wear, won't it?
In the 1700s, you could pay to get a shot on it. If you slipped like the guards some cash, they would let you sit in it. Just for fun. Which I find so funny because that's hundreds of years ago, but it is exactly what would happen today.
Just without the selfies.
Can I sit on the chair?
Hey, can I have a wee seat? If I slip you like 20 quid, can I sit in it just for a second?
Yeah.
All right.
And over time, like, people have carved their names and initials into it. Like, historically, not even recently. Like, choir boys who used to sing in the Abbey carved their initials into the chair. Or people who visited Westminster Abbey picked pieces off the chair to take home with them, little souvenirs. So it's had its fair share of wear and tear.
Yep. I mean, you would totally have a wee seat as a choir boy with free rein. Like, oh, should we sit in it? I would totally have sat in it as a young boy with free rein in this church.
Well, yeah, and this was a very important chair because nearly every British monarch since that time has been crowned sitting in that chair over the Stone of Destiny.
Oh.
The stone is like underneath the chair.
Uh-huh.
The chair was built specifically to house the stone.
Yeah.
And that's where almost every British king and queen has been crowned since then. Even Queen Elizabeth, the current, she was crowned on it in 1953.
Because I know there was calls for England to give back the stone, because, you know, it's now the year 2020.
It's not yours.
Yeah, this isn't yours. You stole this from us. Please give it back. And it was always rejected. And I always thought that was weird, but it makes sense if that's now their stone of kings and queens.
We're going to talk about that in a bit.
I thought we might, but
I have updates. So yeah, Queen Elizabeth, current queen, she was crowned on it back in 1953. The Stone of Destiny stayed in London for about 700 years. No one ever gave it back. None of them were contemporary kings or queens. It became part of their crowning ceremony.
You thought they would have done it as part of, like, the Scottish Parliament opening, you know? That would have been a nice time to do it.
Anyway, we're moving forward with our story.
We're moving on.
There is a theory that the stone that Edward took wasn't actually the real stone.
Oh, decoy.
Exciting, isn't it?
That is exciting.
Now, there's a few reasons for this theory existing. It's the Westminster stone theory, suggesting that the stone that is in Westminster is not the Stone of Destiny. It's the Westminster stone. One of the reasons people think this is because it actually took quite a while for Edward and his troops to reach Scone from the border. It took them a couple of months.
It's fairly far north.
So the monks at Scone Abbey had notice and they knew he was coming. So there was plenty of time for them to hide the stone in the River Tay.
Do the old switcheroo.
Replace it with a fake. Or have the stone taken away to a secret location. A possible hiding place that was put forward for the stone was actually on the Isle of Skye.
Oh, yeah?
In Sleat, which is down in the south of the island. Apparently, Robert the Bruce, who became king several years later, he trusted a man called Angus Og with the stone, who was an important person on the Isle of Skye in the clan system. I'm not going to get into it. According to this theory, the stone is still out on the island somewhere.
Interesting. God, can you imagine if you found it? That'd be wild. I mean, presumably if it was put outside, it would be well buried after 800 years of weather. But
it may even have been well buried at the time.
Yeah.
You know? I doubt they just left it sitting out.
Yeah.
I read an interesting article. I think it may even have been Wikipedia. I can't remember. But it laid out the arguments for and against this substitution theory. So I'll summarise them just now for you. First, the reasons why it's possible that it may have been substituted. looking at the stone without knowing what it is, you probably wouldn't think it's all that special. Like, it is an oblong lump of sandstone with the iron rings. Mm-hmm. It makes sense that Edward could have been given a stone that had been cut several years earlier for use in construction, but then it was deemed not suitable for some reason. Because it's just an oblong.
Well, it sounds like something you'd tie a horse to.
Yeah, so it doesn't look remarkable. Mm-hmm. So it could be that it was replaced with something not remarkable, and that's what was given to Edward. Another reason is that the stone that was taken by Edward is a large block of sandstone, like I said. Mm-hmm. And it's been studied and examined and scanned and everything in more recent times. And it's found that the sandstone that it's made of was quarried from around Scone.
Oh, interesting.
So we were talking... Mm-hmm.
That's what I mentioned.
I'm coming back to it.
Nice callback.
Right? The original Stone of Destiny was supposedly taken over from Iona. So how could it be that the stone was quarried from Scone if it had been taken there much later?
I mean, that's compelling, but I suppose there's no evidence it was taken from Iona either.
Exactly. But that's one of the reasons.
But you can't prove I'm not the Lord Paramount.
Right.
So
it gives you an awful lot of leeway, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The last reason is that if Edward had really taken the Stone of Destiny, this important relic that crowned Scottish kings, why was it that no requests were ever made by Scottish rulers to have it returned? Unless it wasn't the real one.
Interesting. It's like, is it the Da Vinci Code where they're trying to find like the real resting place of Mary Magdalene?
Oh yeah.
But only we know where she actually is. There's a secret society built around the real Stone of Destiny. I
read it was in 1328 that a peace treaty was finally signed between Scotland and England.
When, sorry?
1328. And this is the treaty that recognised Robert the Bruce as king.
Oh, okay.
A very important moment in Scottish history.
Yep.
But even with the new king needing to be crowned, and Scotland had the advantage in this theory, in this treaty, they didn't ask for the stone to be given back. But I also read that Edward did agree to return the stone following this treaty. But when he tried, a huge riot broke out outside Westminster Abbey when the English people found out he was going to give back the Stone of Destiny, and it actually stopped them from being able to give the stone back.
What's it to them?
I don't know. I don't know.
That's very confusing.
Yeah. I think Robert the Bruce was crowned at Scone, as he should have been, but they didn't have the stone. He was crowned without it, but he was crowned at Scone.
Interesting. I've never been to Scone, have you?
Nope.
I just know there's some sort of Christmas market or something my aunt likes going to.
Yes, at the palace.
Yeah.
Scone Palace.
That's all I know about Scone.
No, I've never been.
Contemporarily, and apart from its historical significance.
With all that being said, there are also reasons that substituting the stone was impossible, or at least unlikely.
Yep.
The first is that if the Scots had managed to keep the real stone, it would have been a real power move to reveal that they had the real thing, because it would show how stupid Edward had been.
Yeah.
They would still have their perceived power to crown their own king, and it would defy his victory. But that never happened. There was never a great reveal of the stone.
It would be a bit ballsy to do that, though, because you're inviting a fresh war, aren't you?
Well, exactly. That is one of the counter-arguments. But much later, it would have been completely safe for them to reveal that they had the stone. There was no threat from England later on. But a true stone was never revealed.
Interesting.
Even when it would have been safe.
Yeah.
And Robert the Bruce wasn't crowned on the stone when he became king. So surely if they had the real one, following their victory in the signing of this treaty, that would have been the time to reveal the stone.
Yeah.
As they crowned their new king.
I know. I wonder what he was crowned on. Probably didn't just sit on the grass, eh?
He might have done.
Maybe. Maybe a lot of different stuff. Maybe made him a nice chair.
There's a replica of the Stone of Destiny outside Scone Abbey. Or I think it's still on the hill, actually. There's a replica that's been made that's still there. I think you can see it if you go visit Scone Palace.
That's cool.
Now, remember the notice that the monks had in Scone that Edward was coming for the stone.
Oh, yep.
Right? There were other important artefacts that were housed there that Edward took. Important historical artefacts that historically belonged to the king or queen. Edward also took these. So why, if they had the notice and took the time to replace the stone, did they not hide the other things that he took? The important documents, there's the Black Rood of St. Margaret, which is a relic, those things. Why didn't they hide or replace them?
Yeah, and they would have been a lot easier than moving a 150 kilogram stone.
And replacing it.
And then finding an equally huge and cumbersome stone with metal rings in it to replace it.
Yeah. There were also lots of people who would have seen the original stone before Edward took it to London, and then seen it at Westminster Abbey after the fact. People who were sort of important in Scottish circles who supported Edward. They would have seen the before and after. So if they had noticed a difference, they would have said something.
Yeah.
So it seems likely that they saw the same thing on both occasions.
I think it's the real stone they took, and is that Westminster?
I think it seems quite likely. It seems quite likely. When the stone was examined, like I said before, studied, the markings and the carvings that were on it were studied really closely. And they were deemed to be ancient. And the stone has been affected by erosion that would only happen over a very long length of time. So the stone, as we know it, is very old. And supposedly this proves that it's the genuine article rather than a replacement.
Yeah, I think it's kind of like the theories we've had in other episodes. It's just it's nice to think that there's this secret stone and it still exists and we still have it, and it was a defiance of Edward's victory and stuff, but I don't think it's likely.
An interesting idea that I read that was put forward about the stone is that it wasn't actually as important to the Scottish people as the stories say that it was.
Oh, yeah?
Because it's not really mentioned in any of the literature of the time written around the Wars of Independence. But after Edward took it, it became something huge.
Ooh.
So what if Edward made the stone into an important artefact?
Interesting.
To make it look like he had dealt a real blow. And, you know, as time went on, the people who knew it for what it was would die off and would be replaced by the people who knew Edward had stolen it and had heard all the stories about how important it was and he had taken it, thus making it important to the Scottish people.
That's super interesting.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
Because it seems like the type of thing that might happen.
Absolutely. Well, because
Great propaganda for his cause.
Absolutely. Because if it was just, like, relatively important, like, oh, this is where we crown people. Oh, I'm going to take it. I'm like, well, we'll just crown them somewhere else. Like, we don't care. There's the person will still be king who we crown.
Which they did with Robert the Bruce. They crowned him anyway without the stone, and he was still king.
Yeah, like it's not the source of all our power. You haven't stolen Sauron's ring.
But what if he made it seem as if it was the source of Scotland?
Because that would be much better news to come home to as a conqueror.
I have defeated them. I have this thing that I took that shows they've been defeated.
Look, they'll never be able to crown anyone without this stone.
Yeah. I think it's a very interesting idea.
Yes, I think that's very, very interesting.
I think in terms of how people operate and people think, there's a lot of sense. I don't even really know what to think. I think it's probably the real article that was taken to Westminster.
Yeah.
But it's a far more romantic idea to imagine the stone being spirited away to Skye and hidden away as a last rebellion against the English.
Yeah.
And then just hidden away.
Yeah, it's a nicer story.
If you had to choose a definitive version of what happened, what do you think?
I think Edward took the stone, the stone, the actual one, and everyone went, "Oh man!"
All the monks. That's how they spoke.
Yeah. Oh, dude, lame. It's totally bogus. But I think, I don't know. I would like to believe that it wasn't as important because it's just a nice middle finger to him after he's conquered the country, hammered it, if you will. But I don't know. I just want to believe that. I'm not sure if I do believe it. But I do think it's the real stone he has.
That's fair. That's what a lot of people think. But time goes on. This isn't the end of our story.
I was thinking, this was quite a short episode. That was it.
It's not over, boy. I'm quite glad I managed to surprise you that this isn't actually the end.
Yeah, you built it up as if this was the end. You know, different theories, what happened to the stone. Got me, you son of a bitch.
We're jumping ahead to 1914.
1914? Woofed.
Life is vastly different from the time of Edward and Balliol that we've been talking about. But one thing hasn't changed. Women still do not have the right to vote in the UK. So the suffragettes, you've heard of the suffragettes?
I have.
They hatch a plan as, you know, women's rights activists. They decide to set off a bomb in Westminster Abbey.
Ooh.
With people in it.
Bit far.
This happens on June 11th, 1914. And I read that the explosion was so big that Westminster Abbey shook.
They managed.
Yeah, they set off a bomb. I don't know if it went off exactly when or where they planned, which I'll explain in a bit. But the Abbey shook, and MPs could hear it from the Houses of Parliament. And I double-checked a map of London, and Westminster and the Abbey are pretty close together. They're like across the road. I haven't been to London a lot, if you can't tell. Luckily, no one was hurt. There were people inside the Abbey at the time. No one was hurt. And the bomb had been placed quite close to Edward's chair. But not directly underneath it or where it destroyed the whole thing, which makes people wonder if that's not where it was supposed to explode. The explosion broke off a corner of the chair, and it seemed to cause some damage to the Stone of Destiny, but it didn't actually break. The chair was restored. It was fine. Women did get the vote, if you're interested, but not until 1928. 1928.
So ridiculously late.
What the fuck? I remember telling that to a class I was teaching.
Oh, yeah.
I think it was first or second years, so they were like 12 or 13. And I told the class that women weren't allowed to vote until 1928, and oh my god, like the faces, they were just like, what?
It's hard to believe, even like as an adult, when you know this, but you still hear it and just like, what the fuck?
Yeah. Crazy.
If they had blown the Stone of Destiny in half, you know, we could have got a bit each, you know?
Now this is fair.
Yeah, but then, then there's the war of the bigger half.
The stone slumbered on. Until the year 1950.
Okay.
Now we've gotten to my favourite part of the Stone of Destiny story.
Ooh, how exciting. Is it that it bought a microwave oven and a convertible?
It had no pockets. Couldn't carry any money. It's Christmas Eve, 1950. Very late, middle of the night. Everything is quiet and dark and covered in a dusting of snow. I checked. It did snow that year. Westminster Abbey stands silent. A car pulls up near the works entrance of the Abbey. It parks, the lights turn off, and 3 shadowy figures step out of the car. 3 men. And they sneak up to the works door of the Abbey. They lever it open gently, sneak into the empty Abbey, finding themselves in the famous Poets' Corner of Westminster Abbey. Completely alone. But they aren't there to sightsee or just to wander around the famous tombs. They could have done that any time. These men walk softly towards the Edward the Confessor's chapel in the Abbey, where Edward I, the man who stole the stone, is buried. But also where King Edward's chair was located. Where the Stone of Destiny was located.
Oh shit.
The group are there to steal the Stone of Destiny. We have a heist on our hands.
Oh shit.
So let's go back to the beginning. Ian Hamilton, Kay Matheson, Gavin Vernon and Alan Stewart were students at the University of Glasgow in 1950.
Another Stewart. Keep cropping up the sneaky bastards.
The 4 of them were also part of a group called the Scottish Covenant Association, which was a group that focused on achieving and supporting an independent Scotland. a Scotland with more devolved powers. Now, it's important to understand that at this time, 1950, Scotland didn't have its own parliament. After World War II, the SNP actually only had about 0.7% of the vote across Scotland. It's wildly different now. In the 2021 election, the SNP had nearly 50% of the vote. So you need to understand that it's completely different.
Yeah.
The idea of Scottish identity wasn't the same back in the 40s and 50s. Ian Hamilton was kind of the ringleader of this group of four, and he was the one who came up with the idea to steal the Stone of Destiny from Westminster Abbey and return it to Scotland for the first time in about 700 years.
Oh, shit.
Now, the idea behind the whole thing was, if they could pull this off, they could bind the Scottish people together in what it meant to be Scottish, which in turn would help with the cause of devolution, which is the process of having legal powers taken from Westminster and brought to Scotland, so Scotland can make its own decisions on law and tax and things like that. If people felt proud to be Scottish, then they'd be more keen on having their own parliament and having more independence. So that was the idea behind the whole thing.
Solid plan.
And this was how he decided he was going to do it. So Ian Hamilton came up with a plan, and it was all paid for by a man called Robert Gray, who also supported the devolution movement. The other three students all agreed to join in with the heist. They were going to steal the Stone of Destiny from under the nose of the Westminster government. The four of them arrived in London a few days before Christmas, a few days before actually carrying out the plot, and they had a failed attempt before the one that I started telling you about. Ian tried to hide himself inside the abbey. I think he hid under a trolley or something. But he was caught by security. Someone spotted him. And he was able to pretend fairly convincingly that he was drunk. And he meant nothing by it. And they allowed him to leave. No one suspected a thing. They just thought he was drunk.
Says a lot for the commonality of a drunk Scotsman.
Drunk Glaswegian. Yeah. I think he was born in Paisley. Gavin and Alan, the two other men, managed to stake out the abbey for a day or so, and they watched what all the watchmen did and what their shifts were like, sussed out how they patrolled the abbey and when they wouldn't be there. And from what I can tell, not very much was planned out in this heist.
They just went for it.
Everything was kind of haphazard. It was done very much with a just go for it attitude. Now, talking about it later, Ian said, "There's no way we were great criminals. When I look back now, I have to laugh at the absurdity of it all. I've defended a lot of daft people during 30 years as a criminal lawyer, but I doubt very much if I've defended anyone who was as daft as we were then."
It's just idealistic university students, isn't it? It's funny to know they were always a thing.
Yeah. Oh, just do it. It'd be fine.
Oh, yeah, we'll steal the Stone of Destiny and then we'll bring it home and everyone will be stoked and we'll be like, yeah, for Scotland. How should we do it? We'll just pop in.
We'll just do it. It'd be fine.
We'll just nip in, find a back door, nip in, sneak down, grab the stone, boff, get it out, boom.
Okay, I want you to remember everything you just said. Okay?
Okay.
That whole series, I want you to remember that.
Yep.
Like I said before, on the night of Christmas Eve into the early hours of Christmas morning, the four of them arrived at the Abbey with Kay driving them. So there's the three. There's Ian, Alan and Gavin and Kay. The three men managed to get into the Abbey, like I said, to where the Stone of Destiny was kept, under King Edward's chair. The three men reached under the wooden throne, pulled out the Stone of Destiny, which was extremely heavy. Remember, we're talking over 150 kilos.
Yep.
And they managed to lift it away from the chair. They managed to get it out. But to their horror, the stone breaks into two uneven pieces. There's one smaller bit and one considerably larger bit. It breaks. Now, the reasoning for this seems to be that there was a fault in the stone that was exacerbated by the explosion.
Oh, I almost called it.
You did. So it didn't actually break it when the bomb went off, but it weakened the stone. So when they moved it, it broke.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
That does make sense.
So you can just imagine the horror that they must have felt. And the noise.
Ooh. I bet you £5 that they sat on it before they stole it.
Ooh, £5, sure you can afford that.
Yeah.
Well, they carry on. They have to now.
They can't put it back broken.
No. Ian picks up the smaller piece of the stone, and he manages to get it out to the car that Kay is sitting in outside. He manages to get it into the boot of the car, and he jumps in. But before Kay can drive away, she notices a policeman walking around nearby, and the policeman sees them. Now, this is about 5 a.m.
Yeah.
at this point. In classic heist fashion, Ian and Kay kiss and embrace each other, pretending to be a couple in love who are just out for some 5 a.m. smooching. The policeman comes over to the car and he knocks on the window and he wants to speak to them because they're out in their car outside Westminster Abbey at 5 a.m. on Christmas morning.
In the snow.
They play it cool. They're just out for some alone time at Christmas. Nothing untoward, and they actually end up joking and sharing a cigarette with the policeman, with part of the Stone of Destiny in the boot of their car.
That is smooth talking.
The policeman waves them off as they drive away.
Wow.
Now, it's just the two of them, remember.
I was about to say,
the other two men are either still in the Abbey or nearby. I couldn't tell what they were doing at this time.
Like a couple of Chuckle Brothers coming out of the Abbey.
The other piece of the Stone of Destiny is still in the Abbey too. Ian only took the smaller part. So Ian and Kay, the two of them drive towards Victoria in London. And that's where Ian jumps out of the car. They're fairly sure they haven't been followed or anything. They're far enough away that it's not going to arouse suspicion. Kay keeps the smaller piece of the stone in the boot. And she drives away. She heads for the Midlands, which is further north, where no one will suspect her of anything. And from what the Midlands are just in the middle of England, basically. Ian walks back to Westminster Abbey. The job isn't finished yet.
Well, what are they going to do?
Luckily, the group came down from Glasgow to London with 2 cars. There's the one that Kay was driving, and they had another car, which is also parked near the Abbey. Apparently, it took them like 18 hours to drive down.
It's such a long time. Well, it's really far.
And it's 1950.
Oh, yeah.
18 hours.
Wow.
Ian reaches Westminster Abbey once again. He makes his way inside the way that they did before.
Breaks back in again.
No one spotted them yet, but Gavin and Alan are nowhere to be found.
Oh.
Which is a bit of a problem because the piece of the Stone of Destiny that's left is still massive. Even though there's a bit broken off, it's still very heavy. In the end, after struggling with the thing, he manages to get the stone onto his jacket on the floor, and he drags it out of the Abbey by himself.
He's quite an industrious man.
He even manages to get it into the boot of the second car.
It's impressive.
Just think about that for a minute. How difficult that would be.
Well, you see the big Atlas stones in the strongmen competitions, the big globe-shaped ones. Imagine this, but it's an even more awkward shape.
But you do have a handle.
Oh, you do have a handle, that's true.
You have one handle.
But you're just a person, you're not a strongman.
So he gets the larger piece of the stone into the car. The Stone of Destiny has officially left Westminster Abbey.
Yep.
He climbs into the car and I think he starts driving away. But this is when he sees Gavin and Alan are walking towards him. They were still there. I'm not sure why they had to leave or if they bought, I don't know. But they jump into the car too and they drive away.
I was imagining the angle this car was. 45 degrees with this massive stone in the boot.
Well, the stone was so heavy, they noticed that the car wasn't driving the way it should. The stone is so heavy, it was making the back of the car sag.
Yeah.
It was breaking the springs in the back of the car. That's how heavy it is. I think they had 2 Ford Anglias. I think that's what they were driving.
Is that the car in Harry Potter?
I think so, but I don't know if that's the same model.
Jeez, oh.
But Gavin gets freaked out by how noticeable this is, that something is wrong with the car.
It's quite noticeable.
And as the sun starts coming up, because the policeman caught them at 5 a.m, this is after, Gavin becomes convinced that someone will have noticed by now that the stone is gone.
Apparently,
and people will be looking for them. He freaks out, so he actually leaves. He goes off on his own and makes his way to Warwickshire in the west of England, sort of on the border with Wales.
Okay.
He goes off on his own. Ian and Alan stayed with the car, in the car, with the stone, and they drove to Kent, which isn't too far outside London. It's in the southeast.
It's like a carry-on film.
Basically, they make it to Kent. They find a remote, deserted area, and they hide the larger piece of the Stone of Destiny, in a field. And they leave. They go back to Scotland.
Oh,
no. Now, Kay had done something similar. Remember I said she went to the Midlands?
Yep.
Well, she left her car with a friend that she had there, with the stone in the boot. And she returned to Scotland by train, in the same way that Ian and Alan had done, I think.
Yep.
Which was lucky, because it's lucky they left when they did, because when the police and the government found out that the Stone of Destiny was missing, the border between Scotland and England was closed for the first time in 400 years.
Wow. Well, I mean, where else is it going to be going?
You have to be fair to them. They knew who to suspect from the beginning.
And not just because they're all thieving bastards.
No, they knew where it would probably end up. They knew where people would take it if they'd gone to the trouble of stealing it, so they closed the border.
Oh, well.
So they managed to make it back into Scotland before the border was shut.
Do you think they got their bags checked? Like, in the train at the border. Like, excuse me, sir, do you have the Stone of Destiny in your backpack?
Yeah, this was a huge deal. They had managed to steal the stone.
They managed it.
And the government and everyone were very upset by it. And there was a huge search coordinated by the government to get the stone back.
I was just wondering how they noticed, but well, of course, there's this giant drag mark.
I know. I don't know. I can't imagine what it must have been like to take a peek under the chair and just be like, oh my God.
Do you think there was just like a white line of a scratch mark just from this guy's zip? Just from the door they went in to the chair.
Completely marred Westminster Abbey.
Yeah, just one single line of dragging this zip on the bottom of his jacket pocket.
There was this huge search, but for quite a long time, they couldn't find anything. No clues, no nothing as to what had happened. I can't even imagine what it must have been like. 2 weeks after they stole it, the pieces of the stone, the two pieces, were smuggled into Scotland.
Excellent.
And they were taken to Glasgow, where they were repaired by a stonemason.
Oh, very cool.
His name was Bailey Robert Gray, from what I could find. And he must have known that the stone was stolen and that he shouldn't have it. But what an amazing task to be given. You literally have to fix the Stone of Destiny. Like, you couldn't pass that up.
No. I wonder how.
I read a few things about how he fixed it. I can't remember exactly, but one of the cool things was he actually put a metal tube, a metal rod inside the stone with a note inside it before he fixed it back together.
Very cool.
It was kind of a way to... what's the phrase? Like, prove it's authentic.
Oh, yeah.
Like, he put this inside it so he would know what it said and what was in there.
I like that.
But I'm not sure exactly how he fixed it.
Yeah, that's what I was assuming. Like, kind of drilling holes into each side with lots of metal bars and then just slotting it together.
I think it's something like that. But it was mended.
Yeah.
He managed to fix the stone, so the stone was one piece again. And then, in April 1951, so this is 4 months later...
Oh, yeah, of course. Over a year later, but no, it's across New Year.
4-ish months. The police were contacted because the stone had been found. And the stone was found very carefully and very intentionally placed at the altar of Arbroath Abbey.
Oofed.
Which is where the Declaration of Arbroath was signed in 1320. Now, if you don't know, the Declaration of Arbroath is a hugely significant document because it recognised Scotland's independence from England in a letter to the Pope. So it's a hugely significant part of Scottish identity and the argument for Scottish independence. Because Scotland was given independence from England in this declaration from 1320, and that's where it was signed, and that's where the four of them place the Stone of Destiny.
How many people were involved? Just like, I don't know, I didn't see anything. Just, like not the owner of the abbey, whatever head bishop is there or whatever.
The abbot?
Abbot? I don't know. Was there just seeing this guy. I'll not ask any questions.
But just the balls.
Oh, I know.
I love it.
So good.
And remember, nobody was really thinking about devolution in Scotland. Mm-hmm. Not widely, anyway. And they definitely weren't thinking about Scottish independence. That hadn't really entered a lot of people's minds. So these months where the stone was stolen and then it turned up, it really got people considering these things for the first time. What did it mean to be Scottish?
Fuck. So they managed what they wanted.
They awakened this identity, this nationalism, in a big way.
Wow.
Now, from what I read, the police had started to close in on the 4 students just by doing some basic investigation, because they had not done this particularly well. Once they were on the right track, they were fairly certain that it was them.
Yeah.
Like, Ian had read every single book on Westminster Abbey that you could borrow from the Mitchell Library. So they went to the library and they basically just asked if anyone had been interested in the Stone of Destiny, and they gave them the names. So, like, it wasn't...
You know.
Eventually the 4 of them were questioned by police, and all of them except Ian admitted to being the ones that stole the stone. They were caught.
Is Ian the criminal lawyer?
Yes.
Yeah.
He was kind of the
ringleader, yeah.
He didn't confess to it, but the other 3 did. They said they were involved. Not straight away, but eventually.
Yeah.
Now, given what you've heard of the story, they have been caught. Mm-hmm. What do you think happened next? What kind of punishment do you think was given, and what do you think would have been fair?
I don't know. I don't know if they're going to go super over the top and just completely hammer them, or if they're just kind of go, oh, we got it back and it's fine, so... slap on the wrist, wee bit of a fine. Especially if the ringleader didn't admit it and he was a criminal lawyer for 30 years. There's just, he wasn't, also in jail for 30 years. So I don't know. I'm going to go a light reprimand.
Meaning?
Fine, some community service. Maybe 6 months in jail.
Okay. No charges were brought against them. Not a single one. The police could see, and the government, they were very mindful of all of this. They basically saw the way the story had captured the public in Scotland. Everybody loved it. And these 4 students became celebrities. People really loved what they had done. Which I can totally see.
Oh, yeah.
Like... I think it's the Scottish way that you root for the underdog.
Uh-huh.
So, this is amazing.
This is amazing.
So, if the police, and then by extension the British government, had charged these students with theft and whatever else they could have charged them with, it was very likely that the Scottish people would have had a few things to say, and there might even have been unrest about it.
Yep.
So for that reason, they were so worried about what the Scottish people would do.
Image, yeah.
They didn't charge them with anything.
Oh, hell yeah.
Can you believe that?
That's insane.
The stone was taken back to Westminster Abbey.
I mean, that's fair.
I mentioned it earlier. Queen Elizabeth II, the current queen, she was coronated on the Stone of Destiny in 1953. But they were concerned that they weren't going to find it in time for the next coronation. They didn't know when it was going to be, but they were concerned that they didn't have it.
They knew they had a very old monarch.
So yeah, the stone was returned to Westminster Abbey. Actually, talking about the Queen, Ian Hamilton got himself into a bit of bother about old Queenie when he became a lawyer.
Oh yeah?
He was being sworn in. I don't know if that's the right phrase. But basically you have to take an oath, and part of the oath is acknowledging Queen Elizabeth II in some way. And he didn't want to do this because in his mind she was Queen Elizabeth I of Scotland, not the second. Because the first Queen Elizabeth, who we've talked about, she wasn't ever Queen of Scotland. So he didn't want to acknowledge the current Queen Elizabeth's title as Queen Elizabeth II of Scotland, because Queen Elizabeth I was never Queen of Scotland.
Because Mary, Queen of Scots, was.
Yes.
Interesting. Well, you're not wrong.
Well, he made that point. It's like, well, no, like, she's not the second of my country.
Yeah, she's the second and first.
So, you know, I shouldn't have to acknowledge her in this way. They got around it by saying, like, on a technicality, this is the title they use, even though she has several. They go with this. There was a whole thing. And he had to take his oath their way. But he raised an interesting point.
That is an interesting point.
I thought. It doesn't really change much. And it's a technicality, but it's a thing that he did.
That's really interesting. Because she should be the second and first in the way that King James was the first and sixth.
Yeah. So there you go.
Interesting. I like that.
Now, following the heist, the four of them that carried it out never saw each other again.
Really?
Never.
Wow.
In an interview with Ian, he was saying that they had never seen each other after that event.
That's bizarre. Because you think that sort of thing would bond you for life.
I feel like it could go either way.
Yeah.
Really. And yeah, they went on with their lives. Ian Hamilton, I was saying, he went on to become a criminal lawyer, which he did for about 30 years. And he was the rector of Aberdeen University for a while. So very successful. Alan Stewart went on to become a businessman, and he lived in Glasgow. He died in 2019, so fairly recently. Gavin Vernon was from Aberdeenshire, but he emigrated to Canada in the end, which is fairly common for Scotland. He went on to become an engineer, and he actually returned to Westminster Abbey on Christmas Eve in the year 2000.
Wow.
For the 50th anniversary of what they had done. He went back. And this is incredible to me. The Abbey was opened especially for him.
Wow.
And apparently they greeted him as he came in the door by saying, "Welcome back, Mr. Vernon." Now you have to admit that's pretty cool.
Oh, that's pretty baller. Can you imagine, like, telling your grandkids, like, "Oh yeah, I stole the Stolen Destiny once." Well, like, fuck you did, Grandpa, alright.
Did ya?
Aye, alright. And there's, I'm actually going to be greeted at Westminster Abbey on Christmas Eve because I've been there before. Like,
welcome back, Mr. Vernon.
Oh, that's very classy. That's very classy.
And he passed away in 2004 because they were students in 1950. So.
That's what I was thinking. They must have been 20 when they were students, so they'd be in their 70s by 2000.
Yeah. Isn't that amazing?
That is amazing.
Now, Kay Matheson is interesting to me and will be interesting to you. She went on to become a Gaelic teacher, and she was an advocate for teaching more children in Scotland the Gaelic language and Gaelic generally. She was an SNP candidate in the 1983 general election, but lost out to Charles Kennedy, who you may have heard of.
I have heard of.
Because Kay Matheson was a Highlander. She was born near Alt Bay.
Wow.
Which is really near Ullapool, and she lived in Isleview Nursing Home in Alt Bay itself before she died in 2013.
Oh, crazy! That's where my granny is, in that nursing home.
Yeah, she was there,
wow.
And she was born in Alt Bay, and that's where she lived. That's where she taught in Gairloch.
Interesting, because my granny, who's also in Isleview, she's in her 90s now. Her second name is Matheson, because my step-grandpa was a Matheson. Whoa.
So there you go. Isn't that
weird.
wild?
That is weird. I wonder if she was a cousin.
Maybe.
Or a relative of Christy. Ooh. That's really strange.
I thought that would speak you out. That's why I kept it in. We don't have to keep it in the episode if you don't want people knowing that. That's fine.
That's fine with me.
But yeah, she was in the same care home.
That's bizarre.
Now, she apparently broke 2 toes during the heist that night in 1950.
Ooh.
Which would be so painful.
That would be.
And initially when the police came up north to question her about her involvement, she actually lied and she told them she'd hidden the stone in a peat bog.
Nice.
So they would never get it back. Which I just thought was amazing.
It's with the peat bog fairies now.
Mm-hmm. Isn't that incredible? She was from Alt Bay.
That is incredible. That's
right, just outside Alt Bay.
Yeah. Because Charles Kennedy was the MP in the Old Bay area for a long time.
Yeah, for the Lib Dems, I think.
Yeah. For a long, long time, he was our local MP.
Well, yeah, she campaigned as an SNP candidate, but she lost out to him.
Crazy.
And yeah, she was very vocal. She was an activist her entire life. Really interesting woman.
That is really interesting.
And the fact that she was born and lived so close to where we grew up, I think is quite incredible.
Yeah. That's wild.
Yeah. It wasn't until long after the heist, in 1996, so we are now within our lifetime, 96, that the Stone of Destiny was officially returned to Scotland.
Oh.
I kind of led you on earlier because I didn't want to spoil the big reveal.
I didn't think it was.
Yeah.
Whoa.
So it was 700 years, almost exactly, not to the month but to the year, after it was taken from Scotland, that the stone was returned to Edinburgh Castle.
Oh, fuck.
1996, 1296.
Crazy.
And it came at a time when more and more Scots were unhappy with how they were being treated by the Parliament at Westminster. It was a very different climate to the one in 1950. Things had evolved and changed. And it was a huge operation getting the stone from Westminster to Edinburgh. I'm talking police escorts, specialist equipment, conservation specialists on how to look after the stone, multiple rehearsals of the event.
Crazy.
To walk through how it would all go. Mountains of paperwork. You name it, they had to do it. They actually had a special hand barrow crafted to lift the stone out of Westminster Abbey, and it was built to replicate the type of hand barrow that stonemasons had in medieval times.
Oh, wow.
Which I thought was very cool.
That is very cool.
And on the 30th of November, St Andrew's Day in Scotland, he's the patron saint of Scotland, 1996, the stone was officially handed over at Edinburgh Castle.
Whoa.
Unfortunately, it was Prince Andrew who came and did it on behalf of the Queen. She didn't even come herself. She sent her pig of a son. But anyway.
Well, that's a shame.
It was handed over, and 10,000 people waited along the length of the Royal Mile in Edinburgh to see the stone being brought through the city.
Wow.
Kay Matheson was actually the only one of the 4 students who went to the ceremony that day. The others didn't go.
I thought they would have all gone.
Nope.
Because that's what they wanted.
Ian Hamilton actually said he didn't want to see the stone again at all until Scotland was independent. And this was a rule he broke in the end, in 2008, or around 2008, because a movie came out about what they had done called Stone of Destiny. And there was a reception held at Edinburgh Castle for the film that he went to, and that's when he saw the stone again. But he had said he didn't want to see it again until Scotland was an independent country.
Wow. I thought it would be the kind of thing that was a movie. The way you were telling it, that's very movie-like. I was surprised there wasn't one, so I'm glad to hear.
Robert Carlyle is in it. He's a famous Scottish actor.
Oh, very cool.
And Charlie Cox, who was in Stardust.
Oh.
Rooney Mara as well, she's an actress. She plays Kay Matheson. But when Ian was talking about seeing the stone again, he said, I always said I didn't want to see it again until it was part of an independent Scotland. But independence is now inevitable. I'm not going to wait for the technicality that it hasn't actually happened. The great thing about the stone is that it transcends politics. Regardless of our political views, Scots recognise that there is something that binds us together.
He sounds awesome. Is he still alive?
Yes.
Hey.
Yes, he is. And like I was saying earlier, the political and cultural landscape of Scotland has changed vastly over the years. In 1997, the Scottish people voted to have our own parliament, which opened in 1999. Before that, Scotland didn't have its own parliament. It now has powers that were previously held by Westminster, allowing Scotland's elected MPs to make decisions that dictate the lives of Scottish people. Scotland, before that, hadn't had its own parliament since 1707, which is when the Act of Union was introduced and the Scottish Parliament effectively voted itself out of existence. 1707.
Wow.
That's nearly 300 years.
Yeah.
So it's easy to take for granted, but Scotland having its own parliament again was a really big deal.
It was a really big deal.
And then, in 2014, the independence referendum was held, allowing Scottish people to vote on whether they felt that Scotland should be an independent country altogether.
A heartbreaking result.
I know, I'll try not to be biased, but Scotland voted to remain part of the Union 55% to 45%. The turnout for this vote was the highest ever recorded for an election or referendum held in the UK since 1910.
Wow.
84.6% of the electorate turned out for that vote.
That's insanely high.
Yeah.
Jeez, oh.
That in itself is something to be proud of. Now, I personally believe that, given the chance, Scotland will vote for independence in my lifetime.
I think so.
And I was a yes voter. I voted for independence, so I hope that's the case. That's probably not going to surprise you if you've listened for a while, but that's how I voted. I think it would be better.
Not to mention, because it was all like, no, if Scotland leaves the UK, you won't be part of Europe anymore.
Yeah.
And then I was like, okay, so we want to be part of Europe. Like, oh, sorry, we're doing Brexit now, so we're not actually part of Europe.
Yeah.
Fuck you guys. I'm like, oh.
All this money is going to be given to the NHS. Look, we're talking about it on the side of a bus. Lots of shady dealings.
We'll not go there.
No, that's something different, I feel, to the sense of Scottish identity that has been built over the past 100 years. I feel like that's something different.
Yep.
The Stone of Destiny itself and the actions of those students in 1950 played a huge part in shaping the Scotland that we recognise and feel pride for today.
I know. I can't believe how much they achieved.
I feel very lucky that, as a Scottish person, I have such a strong sense of national identity and of who I am and where I come from. I'm proud to be Scottish, and I appreciate that's something unique and that's something that has been fought for, because the sense of pride I feel didn't necessarily exist in the same way 50, 70 years ago.
Yeah.
And without this sense of pride and this sense of belonging, this podcast wouldn't exist.
Yeah.
In a way, we've become a part of that process, you and me. Passing along our history and our stories, we've become part of the Scottish identity.
Yeah.
Which is something really special.
That is. Never thought of it like that.
And that is the story of the Stone of Destiny.
Oh, what a way to finish season 2.
I'm hoping that, at least if you're Scottish, maybe even if you aren't, you've been left with this little glowing ember in your belly of just pride of who we are. And
we know for American and some European listeners who are descendants of Scotland, hope you're a little more proud as well of where your ancestors came from.
Yeah.
I know I am. How did I not know this Stone of Destiny was back in Scotland?
That surprises me. I thought you knew that part.
I know.
But I decided to hide it as best I could.
I appreciate that.
For the reveal.
That was a much more satisfying reveal.
I think it's actually going to be moved from Edinburgh Castle to Perth.
Oh.
I think the decision was made last year for it to be moved, but I don't think it's been moved yet. But at the moment it's in Edinburgh Castle. You can go see it along with the Scottish Crown Jewels in the crown room of the castle. It's on display. You can go see it. And there's the replica at Scone Palace, I think, that you can go see.
Yep.
But it's such an incredible story.
Yeah, I can't believe that final story about those 4.
I know.
Or that she was at Isle of View. That's really weird. Huh.
Did you enjoy it?
I thoroughly enjoyed that. That was a phenomenal episode. And congratulations to you for the production of season 2.
Aw, thank you.
That was on behalf of the listeners, that applause.
Thank you for editing and
I've got the easy job though.
doing everything to do with tech. Well, it wouldn't come out if you didn't do that. Let's be real.
Well, thank you.
I would just have lots of documents of rambling that I couldn't talk to anyone about.
I think this is cool and no one will listen. God. Well, I'm like glowing.
I know.
So proud. As to be Scottish, not just of finishing season 2.
It gives you that feeling, doesn't it?
Yeah, I'm like, yeah, we did. When the next referendum comes around, which fingers crossed it will, we can just promote this episode. Like, everyone listen to this before you vote.
Well, you know what? When I was doing all my research on the independence referendum, to be able to boil it down to a couple of sentences, that's why these episodes take so long. I have to satisfy my itch to know everything that's important about a topic before I can boil it down to the essentials that you need to know.
Well, that's because I savaged you accidentally in our very first episode by just asking a question 30 seconds in that you didn't know the answer to.
But I was seeing that... Do you remember the WikiLeaks scandal? one of the things that got leaked in that was that David Cameron had a meeting with Sony Executives before Outlander was released, and it looks like they deliberately delayed the release of Outlander till after the independence referendum in the UK. Because it was released in America before the referendum, but it wasn't released. There was a delay. It wasn't released until after the referendum in the UK because they felt like it would be too influential.
Oh my god, David Cameron is such a sneaky son of a bitch.
And that was one of the documents that was leaked by WikiLeaks. Was the emails between them.
Crazy.
Isn't that insane?
That is insane.
So things, the media does have an impact.
Mm-hmm. Big time.
What you consume. That's not to say that we're particularly influential. It's just a fact I came across.
It's just interesting. Wild.
Well, I hope that I have left you with a nice warm fuzzy feeling for the end of season 2.
For the pre-Christmas special.
Yes, the pre-Christmas special. Thank you to everyone who's listened. No matter when, no matter how much.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. It means the world.
Yeah. We're getting quite a few listeners now, and we're incredibly thankful for all of you.
For those of you that come back episode on episode and support us across platforms and share what we do, it really means the world.
It does. Thank you so much.
Because we love getting to do this. It's the best thing that I do.
Yeah, it's really a joy. And to keep updated on what we're doing next and things in season 3, follow us on Instagram.
Yeah, I'm most active there.
Keeps fairly up to date on Instagram. I am not very up to date on our Twitter, but that does exist.
I mean, you could hassle him on Twitter, then maybe he'd be more active.
Yeah, that's true, eh?
We're also on TikTok.
Yep.
On TikTok, we're at Generally Spooky Podcast. So, I post funny videos of the dog and things like that over there, so you can follow us. But Instagram is probably where you'll find out first when we're going to be back with season 3.
Yep. And I guess until then, thank you very much.
I know, we won't get to speak to you next week.
I know, I'm sad. I mean, I'm excited to see you on evenings and weekends again. But
I have been a bit buried. To be fair, I have been a bit buried.
Yeah.
If you have any requests for episodes, you can email at generallyspooky@gmail.com. If you have a ghost story of your own, or spooky story of any kind, we now have enough to start putting out episodes.
Yes.
So tell us your story and we will share it on the podcast.
Yes,
and
we
we'll
will.
talk about it at the same email address, generallyspooky@gmail.com. But aside from that, we have to retreat back into our cupboards now and go into hibernation.
You can get some sleep, that'll be nice.
Yeah, that will be nice. And we will speak to you in season 3.
We will. Bye.
Bye.